Hello, my name is Povilas. I am a doctoral student at Vytautas Magnus University, and currently I am preparing my dissertation on perception of Lithuania in a German print during the 16th-17th centuries. And this paper reflects my research I have undertaken during the past few months during my research stay in Germany. And my aim is also to not only discuss the sources I have researched, but however about how Lithuania was perceived in it. And so the sources in question are the first periodical foreign news publication printed in Leipzig and distributed via the city book fairs throughout Saxony and partly in the rest of German lands. These are so-called Messerelationen. It would translate something as a trade fair reports. They are short booklets, usually between 50 and 100 pages long, in which news about various foreign affairs are gathered. The spectrum of the events described is very wide, from weddings to miracles, but usually majority concern war-related news. These publications were specially prepared and published 3 times a year for the book fairs at New Year, Easter, and in autumn or on St. Michael's Day. The earliest such Messerelationen appeared actually in Frankfurt am Main at the end of the 16th century, and in Leipzig they started to be printed. They created their own in 1605. And although there were other such Messerelationen, but only those published in Frankfurt and these in Leipzig, which I will discuss, these Messerelationen were distinctive because despite wars and upheavals, they were published without interruptions throughout the entire 17th century and even beyond into the 18th. Thus, having achieved a great success in terms of popularity, they have become an influential media channel informing Germans, foremost Saxons, and shaping their understanding of foreign lands. German historians have long debated and are still debating whether these Messerelationen may be considered the first newspapers or not. Some characteristics apply to that, but this is not the question today. What matters is that they were first periodical publications in German history devoted to foreign news, and for this reason I have chosen to devote my paper to a very brief analysis on the image of Lithuania that readers in Saxony might have formed from these Leipzig Messerelationen. It is an interesting question, especially knowing that Lithuania at the time was in common state with Poland, and the question of Lithuania's sovereignty and the limits of its power is very widely discussed today, and this question is especially relevant to current historiography. It's a common topic, but it is problematic when it comes to contemporary sources, especially foreign sources. So the question is, what can these Messerelationen in early modern German newsprint can tell us about? So first about general layout of these documents. It differed throughout the 17th century. During the first decades, or something maybe until middle of 17th century, Messerelationen had some sort of content, but later it disappeared. Approximately until 60s, messages were just randomly scattered without any noticeable order at the beginning with the content of them. Later, structures changed again. From now on, everything was organized into chapters, which are named after different countries. And when we speak about this kind of structure, the chapter dedicated to our region is clear. It's called Poland. It is similar before that, not in every case, but most quite often when messages were just scattered depending without any relevance to the particular region. They were also, in most cases, not every time, they came under the title Poland. But this does not mean that the distinctiveness of other regions, such as Grand Duchy of Lithuania, including Ruthenia, part of Ukraine, that these regions were ignored, and most importantly, that readers were not able to grasp a complex picture that did not happen. The name Poland was used in two senses, as I will argue, and the editors were fully aware of that, and the perception of Grand Duchy political status was formed on several layers. Firstly, the abundance of reference to specific Lithuanian localities gave readers a sense of geography of the region. Over the time, and depending on geopolitical events, different cities of Grand Duchy attracted greater or lesser attention. In the earlier 17th century, Smolensk was one of them. It clearly stood out. It was frequently mentioned because of the repeated wars with Muscovy for controls of the city. It is a bordering city between then Grand Duchy of Lithuania and Grand Duchy of Muscovy, and because of both states realized its economical and strategic importance, and both states struggled for its dependence. So Messerelationen referred to Smolensk as a main cause of the conflict. There were many messages regarding that. Reports on the city recurred in many issues, especially during the siege in 1630, 1670. But even after that, there were further reports in the print that, for example, Moscow was rearming to take it, or that possession of Smolensk was the greatest obstacle in attempt to reach peace between the two warring sides. And especially in the middle of the 17th century, during the Deluge and Khmelnytsky uprising, when the city was seized by Tsar. Moreover, all these times, Smolensk was geographically located. It is mentioned that, for example, it is beyond Polotsk, other city in Grand Duchy, or other places are being described as being nearby Smolensk. So it was frequently mentioned, most frequently mentioned Ruthenian city, and because of these different references, one can grasp that editors expected readers to know somehow where it is on the map, and the readers could know that. Similar tendencies happened with Vilnius, which is the most mentioned city, unambiguously the most frequently mentioned city of Grand Duchy, known in 17th century German as Wildau. In the early part of the 17th century, the city is often mentioned in these newspapers as the destination of kings, armies, or magnates. Readers were informed whenever the monarch resided there. It received a great amount of attention during the Cossacks uprising, the Deluge. Vilnius was described, for example, as a place of refuge for civilians and troops, or as being under direct threat. The dramatic capture of Vilnius in 1655 was covered in detail. The city was mentioned as of extraordinary beauty and very populous. Later readers were closely informed of Polish and Lithuanian armies' attempts to liberate it and their successful recapture. Also other cities of Lithuania, Kaunas, Kėdainiai, Biržai, and even more, they sometimes are also mentioned, but not that often. Samogitia, a region of Lithuania, was an ethical region of Lithuania, also appeared quite frequently, often in reports of campaigns launched from or directed against Lithuania in context with clashes of Swedes, Prussians, Russians, Duchy of Courland. Again, the greatest amount of news came during the deluge. Thus, the 17th century reader of Nacionalinė could get and form a fairly clear picture of Lithuanian boundaries and its principal cities, especially that it was mentioned that they were Lithuanian. Reports often mention various directions of movements, for example, that Radvila retreated toward Vilnius, or refugees from one place fled to Vilnius, or that Brandenburg troops advanced toward direction of Kaunas, and etc., etc. These references to different directions and locations enable the reader to form a mental map of Grand Duchy, visualizing its localities and boundaries. Particular interesting are short descriptions of Poland, Lithuania, and Prussia, which appeared also in these newspapers later. They differed from half-page to one-page paragraphs, combined history and geography of the land, informing the reader about the region. And Lithuania was described as consisting of 10 voivodeships, and it was said that it was united, Vereinigen in German, with Poland under Jogaila. Other states are also mentioned and described, for example, Duchy of Courland, that they were, in case of Courland, that it is positioned northern of Lithuania, or Prussia, that it's western of Samogitia, and similar descriptions. Lithuania is also mentioned under description of Poland. It is stated that it belongs to Poland, but it's part of Poland, but it has different voivodeships, and this comes to how Poland was understood in these newspapers, and what Poland means in Nacionalinė, because it was understood in dual sense. In a narrow sense, Poland meant Kingdom of Poland, Greater and Lesser Poland as a geographical regions, and this understanding is clear in reports on wars and troop movements, when people, cities, and various events happened in Lesser or Greater Poland, and they are described as Polish. But Poland also serves as a name for entire Commonwealth, including Grand Duchy of Lithuania, and without erasing its existence as a component of different origin. In modern historiography, this is known because sometimes it is also broader term, instead of broader term Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Poland sometimes is used, though rarely. But it is interesting that this duality of Poland also applies to 17th century Saxon newspapers. So how one can see that? In case of Poland, when the description is given about the land, as I mentioned, Lithuania is mentioned, but without naming all the voivodeships of Lithuania, so one can, as if to suggest that Lithuania is something separate from Poland. Another interesting message is about Brest-Litovsk. It was a city on the border between Lithuania and Poland, and as these periodicals describe it, a city between Lithuania and Poland, but on the very heart of Poland. So the sentence clearly reveals two elements: that where the Poland ends, Lithuania begins, but Brest-Litovsk stands between them, but also at the heart of Poland. So the dual meaning is clear: Poland in a narrow sense as a region, something other than Lithuanian, and Poland as a state that includes both Poland and Lithuania. Another example is about news mentioning an army being assembled in Poland as a commonwealth. It is stated that people are recruited in Poland in a narrow sense, and in Lithuania. or reports on campaigns of Lithuanian field hetman Goshevsky, who fought against Swedes in Livonia during the deluge. And the hetman each time is described differently. One time he's named that he's Polish, other time that he's Lithuanian, one time that it is said that he leads Polish troops, other time they are called all Lithuanians, and same applied sometimes to other Lithuanian magnates and cities. So one might think that such inconsistencies arose simply from ignorance and unawareness of editors, perhaps that all of this is just a big mess and totally unawareness. But I believe otherwise. As argued above, Poland in this Nacionalinė had two distinct meanings, and that makes sense, and one can see from these examples. It would be very difficult to believe, especially during the deluge period, when so many detailed reports were published regarding our region, that editors and readers were wholly unaware of simple differences between Lithuania and Poland, especially that these two notions were also used. Thus, it means that for editors to write and for readers to understand, the terms Lithuania and Poland could be used interchangeably, as long as Poland here refers to a common state. In modern scholarship, again, this duality is well understood, but it's interesting to see that in German print. Next question is how extensively Lithuania and Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was covered in this Leipzig Messe-Relationen. The amount of information was uneven. As historians note, in mid-17th century, the Khmelnytsky uprising and deluge was some sort of golden age regarding the amount of information on our region, the international attention, and the amount of print which was published. And these Messe-Relationen, they are no exception. Until about 1647, 1648, coverage was limited, and it varied, with the reports on Poland-Lithuania making up from 1 to 10% of one issue. With the outbreak of deluge, however, interest surged greatly. In some numbers, half of the entire publication, again, they came 3 times a year, half of the entire publication was devoted to news and affairs, just to Commonwealth. But more usually after that, after the deluge, the amount ranged between a quarter and a third of the issue, until the end of deluge, sorry. But after that, it dropped, but not to the earlier levels. For example, in 60s, 70s, roughly 10% of each issue still covered Poland and Lithuania, and this proportion remained fairly stable thereafter. Was that a lot? There are not many similar studies with which we could compare when it comes to newspaper print. We do have studies on French newspaper La Gazette and on the similar period and on the coverage of Commonwealth. According to historian Komentavicius, who have done that, about 5% of the content concerned Poland-Lithuania in French newspapers. And as he considered, it was one of the most systematic and detailed sources on Commonwealth in Europe. And thus, it is clear that Leipzig Messe-Relationen, in both scale and quantity of information, at least matched, but often surpassed French Gazette. This underlines the importance and relevance of these sources that constantly informed Saxons and more broadly German readers about events of our region, and research into these publications is thereafter therefore are vital for understanding perception of Lithuania and Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in early modern print culture. So, thank you.